A reading from the book of Deuteronomy. Moses said to the people, "Now, Israel, hear the statutes and decrees which I am teaching you to observe, that you may live and may enter in and take possession of the land, which the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you. And your observance of the commandments of the Lord your God, which I enjoin upon you, you shall not add to what I command, nor subtract from it. Observe them carefully, for thus you will give evidence of your wisdom and intelligence to the nations, who will hear of all these statutes and say, 'This great nation is truly a wise and intelligent people.' For what great nation is there that has God so close to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call upon him? Or what great nation has statutes and decrees that are as just as his whole law, which I am setting before you today?" The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
For the ancient Israelites, the Mosaic law was not simply a moral code, a listing of what was right and of what was wrong. It was more than that. It was a way of life, and it was central to their identity as God's people. The law was a sign of God's love and concern for them. God had chosen them out of all the peoples and tribes of the world to be his people and to reveal his ways to them. A couple of chapters later in Deuteronomy, Moses will tell the people, "Take to heart these words which I enjoin on you today. Drill them into your children. Speak of them at home and abroad, whether you are busy or at rest. Bind them at your wrist as a sign, and let them be as a pendant on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." But this great gift of being God's people and of having God's law came with responsibilities. They were to be a sign for all the peoples of the world. As we just heard, observe them carefully, for thus you will give evidence of your wisdom and intelligence to the nations, who will hear of these statutes and say, "This great nation is truly a wise and intelligent people." The law was not just for them and their own personal holiness. The law was to help them to be a sign to their neighbors and to all the peoples of the world, showing all of them God's way. For us today as Christians, Jesus has shown us that the heart of it means to follow the law is to love. As we heard in the gospel on Wednesday for the feast of St. Louis, Jesus was asked by the Pharisees what the greatest commandment in the law is. Jesus responded by saying, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." This is the commandment that we have been given by God, and it is how God calls us to live. And just as the Mosaic law was not just for personal holiness for the Israelites, the law of Jesus is not simply for our holiness. Instead, by living a life of love of God and of neighbor, we become signs of God's presence and of Christ's presence to all peoples. In John's Gospel, during the Last Supper, Jesus tells the apostles that all people will recognize us as his disciples by the love that we have for one another. But this is not an easy love that we are called to. It is a difficult and a demanding love that calls us to give completely of ourselves. It is the love that led Jesus to the cross. Dying to ourselves is the starting point of Christian love and discipleship. And by dying, we become a gift to others, helping them to know the love that God has for them. And this is an important lesson for us as preachers. Yes, the words we speak are vitally important for the mission of preaching the gospel. But if we did not also offer an example of what Christian life looks like, our words will go in one ear and then go out the other. It is the lesson that Dominic saw playing out with the Albigensians. The Albigensians looked and acted much more like the apostles of the early church than the Catholics did, and because of that, many people followed them. If we want our preaching as Dominicans to bear fruit, our lives must be authentically Christian and authentically Dominican. All of the rules that we have been given by God, the church and the order, are not simply for our own good, but they are to make our lives more like Christ's life. Lives of faith, lives of hope, lives of love. Seeing people whose lives reflected Christ's love and service is what drew me into a greater life of faith. I've seen it happen in the lives of many other people, and it will continue to do so into the future. I leave you with this question to ponder and to meditate on. Would the life you live inspire you to become a Christian if you were the only Christian that you knew?
Yeah.